So yesterday, I recorded a video talking about my disappointment with this game and how I thought the final boss battle was cheap. I didn't realize that I was put on full tilt. I was raging and I was being very salty. And I realized like this morning, kind of like after waking up from my frustration, as all gamers do whenever they just raged and they just put a game down, that I was put on tilt. I was raging so hard, and I came back to it this morning. I looked up a video on YouTube, kind of just, just to see what it was, and a guy literally beat the final boss without the final boss attacking. So it literally, if I had edited the video and if I had released it on YouTube, it would have just made me look like an insolent jackass to say the shit that I had said about the game last night. But it also instilled upon me a renewed passion, because I know that some of my videos have been very dry and very boring because it's just me talking to you, and I don't really have a lot of gameplay, or I don't really have a lot of sound effects and yada yada yada. But I'm trying to work on that now. I'm trying to fix that now, so that way the videos can be more entertaining. But kind of want to just talk about Trails of Cold Steel now that I have some clarity and I'm not really reacting. Hang on, let me just. There we go. I'm not really reacting to the game because I'm angry. I'm gonna react to the game because I'm calm. Trails of Cold Steel is a very mediocre-esque game. It has a very mediocre story and a fairly decent and complex combat system, but it's a turn-based game, and I'll probably do a video on this kind of soon, explaining like the intricacies of turn-based combat in both modern and previous eras of video games, like in the 1990s when it was very popular with Square Enix, the 2000s, the early 2000s, kind of how Square Enix got away with that, because Square Enix pretty much just mainstream and popularized that specific genre of gameplay, right? And how turn-based style of combat is inputted in modern day games like Trails of Cold Steel, for example. But that's another video for another time. The problem with turn-based combat is that it takes up a lot of time, right? So you get invested in a game because of how much time you put into that game. And the reason why you put in so much time and effort into the game is because of the story. And the problem is that the story isn't very good. It's borderline below mediocre in some areas. For instance, you spend 30 plus hours, I should say, doing the same shit over and over and over again. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. There are games that evolve their story in 15 hours, 10 hours, an hour, more than Trails of Cold Steel did in 30 hours, right? I'm almost starting to work myself up in a frenzy again, but it's the truth. It takes so much time for the story to evolve that it's borderline ludicrous. Like, once you think about it, it's like, I remember someone on IGN said that Xenogears took like 20-something hours to actually get to the point in the story where you can get the mechs. And I'm like, well, that's ridiculous. Then I played Trails of Cold Steel, and as I realized, like 30 hours into the game, I'm like, okay, this is when the game kind of picks up. I had excuses for the game, and it's absolutely, unequivocally unexceptional that the game took that long to have some type of inkling of a story, let alone just spending like the next 50 or so hours going into like the next 50 hours are okay, but they aren't worth the 30 hours of investment that you put into the game, which is why I think the game is mediocre, because you spend so much time doing one thing, and then like the next 50 hours, it's okay, it's not great, there's not these very revolutionary plot devices. I'll have to see what Trails of Cold Steel 2, when it's released tomorrow, will have to say about that. But it's mediocre, right? And the worst thing is that the gameplay is actually the best part of it. The gameplay has these very intricate things with arts. You can increase your stats. You have you have a lot of underutilized systems in the game. The game focuses primarily on the combat link system, which it's a lot harder to use than every other system in the game, every other combat system in the game, and B, it sucks, right? It sucks because you have to stack up points of like combat link points that you have to get to really use like rush and burst, right? And even then, depending on the type of enemy, those two scenarios or those two combat link, combos, they won't be utilized properly against some enemies, because the combat links, they take advantage of your weapons. So if you don't have good weapons, which cost a shit ton of money in the game, then the combat links won't really be effective. And B, some of the enemies are immune to some of your weapons. So it's a combat system that has too much risk for too little reward, right? Whereas you have the arts, which are pretty much the most redeemable thing about the game's gameplay, right? You have so much customization within the arts. You have the Master Quartz, which affects like your base stats. Then you have Minor Quartz that can affect a lot of different stats, more so than the Master Quartz. Even though the Master Quartz pretty much gives a specific character a certain style of play, the Master Quartz are interchangeable. So you have these very... It's kind of like having a blank sheet of paper and being able to write whatever you want on it. It's pretty much that system with the arts. You have so much freedom with customizing your characters that it's almost like Final Fantasy V, where you have all of these characters and you're not told what to do with them. You can do whatever you want with them, and there's really no punishment as long as you're winning fights, I guess. And it's kind of like that. And I love it. And I think a lot of people love it because you can do a lot of very creative things with the arts system that you can't do with the combat link. And then you have the crafts. The crafts stand for, or not stand for, they're just crafts, right? Crafts are like the easiest way to beat bosses, I would say. Not necessarily the individual crafts that people have, but the S crafts. They're pretty much like a champion's, I shouldn't have said champions, they're pretty much like a character's ultimate ability that they can use to, not even to anything, they can just use it whenever they want to, but they have to have 100 CP, they have to have 100 craft points. The only way to get craft points is by beating up enemies, or in Rain's case, because his Master Quartz allows him to get 20 CP per enemy killed. You only have to kill enemies with Rain, right? Now, the best thing about the Master Quartz, not the Master Quartz, but the craft system, excuse me, is that you can use it very strategically to kill bosses. Like, you can go in with 200 CP, which is the max you can get it, to fight a boss, and you can have your full party, all 6 to 7 of them, depending on where you are in the game. You can have all of them have these master crafts on, and you can just absolutely dominate bosses very quickly. And I was a little bit annoyed yesterday because I couldn't do that, and the game's like, slow down, you gotta grind out a little bit, and I'm a little bit annoyed about grinding out, to tell you the truth, but at the same time, I'm like, alright, I understand how to beat this boss now. It'll probably take me a couple of days to really just lock in and prepare to suffer and do this shit, but I figured out how to beat the boss. So, what else? I talked about gameplay a little bit, I talked about the story. I think another aspect of the gameplay is just, you know, the basic melee attacks, which at the beginning of the game there's actually some use to it. There's different characters with different weapons, and every character, like there's two characters that have the same weapon. Other than that, every other character has a different weapon. But weapons don't really matter in the game. Again, it's arts, because arts and quartz, I should say quartz, they affect your passive and active stats. So you can have a bunch of health on someone that deals a lot of damage with their weapons, or you can have someone with a lot of mana or whatever, and it goes into a deeper system. But the melee attacks are kind of useless because they don't do as much damage as crafts or arts to a variety of enemies. Like, to some enemies they do a lot, to others not really. And especially against bosses, they're kind of unreliable depending on who the character is. Like, for instance, if you have Laura, she's very reliable with crafts. But if you have someone like Elisa, who's practically useless across the board when it comes to her crafts and her attacks with her bow, it kind of becomes this. It kind of becomes ridiculous to try and use Elisa in these boss battles with using her bow. Like, she's not useless in the sense that she's a great healer, but she's useless in the sense that she can't do shit with her bow, right? I think that's gonna be it. It was me again, 24. Like, comment, favorite, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'll try and post another video about my sports predictions, about mostly basketball, just basketball, either today or tomorrow, because the basketball season is coming up in November, and 2K is coming up. I should actually post a follow-up video. I will post a follow-up video to 2K17, and it looking interesting. I'll leave you with that. I'll see you today or tomorrow.